Your income will rarely exceed your personal growth. And that's one of the most profound truths I've ever discovered. Most people spend their lives chasing income without realizing that income is simply a reflection of who you've become. If you want to earn more, you must first become more. You don't get paid for the hour, you get paid for the value you bring to that hour. And value is built through growth, personal, intellectual, emotional, and financial. I remember early in my career, I wanted money to solve my problems. I thought if only I could make more, life would get easier. But the reality was, my money never outgrew my mindset. The bills still came, the stress still mounted, because I hadn't grown myself. Then I heard the life-changing idea. If you want things to get better, you must get better. If you want things to change, you must change. That was the turning point. I stopped chasing money and started chasing growth. Growth comes from disciplines you choose daily. Reading just 30 minutes a day is enough to transform your thinking in a year. Imagine what happens if you read books on finance, biographies of successful people, strategies for leadership. You'll start thinking different, and when your thinking changes, your results follow. Courses and seminars sharpen your edge because you're surrounding yourself with knowledge and energy that lift you higher. And perhaps the most important skill of all, communication. You could have brilliance locked in your mind, but if you can't convey it clearly, the world will never reward you for it. Master how to speak, how to persuade, how to listen. Those are wealth skills. Think of it this way. Money doesn't flow to need, it flows to value. The marketplace doesn't say, here's what you want. It says, here's what you're worth. That may sound harsh, but it's empowering because you control what you're worth. You decide to grow, to study, to practice, to refine your character. And when you do, your value rises, and so does your income. So don't just invest in the stock market or the real estate market. First, invest in yourself. Because when you grow, everything else in your life has no choice but to grow with you. Don't chase money, attract it. That may sound unusual at first because most people spend their whole lives running after money, working harder, working longer, thinking if they just squeeze in one more hour, money will finally catch them. But money is not something you pursue. It is something you attract by becoming valuable. The market does not respond to desperation, it responds to contribution. If you want more, don't run after the money. Work on being the kind of person money wants to find. Here's the truth. Money flows toward those who solve problems. Every product you buy, every service you use, is simply someone solving a problem for you. A smartphone solves the problem of communication. A doctor solves the problem of health. A teacher solves the problem of ignorance. The bigger the problem you solve, the more valuable you become, and the more the market rewards you. It's not luck, and it's not magic, it's value exchanged for reward. When I was younger, I thought money would come if I just worked harder. But I quickly learned that you don't get paid for effort, you get paid for results. I knew a man who had been digging ditches for years, sweating hard every day, but his pay never changed. Why? Because he wasn't solving a bigger problem. Hard work is honorable, but hard work without increasing value is limited. On the other hand, I've seen people who studied, practiced, and mastered a skill that the market demanded, and suddenly their value multiplied, and so did their income. The strategy is simple. Focus on increasing your value in the marketplace. One of the best decisions you can make is to learn one high-demand skill every year and master it. Imagine if you picked up the skill of digital marketing, or public speaking, or investing, or negotiation, or leadership. Not just dabbling, but truly mastering one skill per year. In 5 years, you'd be unrecognizable to your former self, and the market would not ignore you. People don't pay for average. They pay for excellence. So stop chasing money. It will run faster than you can catch it. Instead, stand still, plant yourself in the soil of growth, water your mind with knowledge, and nurture your skills until they blossom into undeniable value. When that happens, you won't have to run after money anymore. Money will come looking for you. Poverty doesn't begin in the wallet, it begins in the mind, and the seed of poverty is excuses. Excuses are expensive. They cost you opportunities. They cost you growth. They cost you the chance to change your life. Wealth, on the other hand, doesn't start with money in the bank. It starts with responsibility in the heart. The day you decide to stop blaming circumstances, stop blaming your past, stop blaming others, and take ownership of your results, that's the day you plant the first seed of wealth. I've met people who are brilliant with excuses. They can tell you 50 reasons why they're not doing well. The economy's bad. My boss doesn't recognize me. I wasn't born into the right family. I don't have enough time. They're fluent in the language of limitation. And every time they repeat these lines, they dig themselves deeper into the pit of poverty. Excuses may sound comforting in the moment because they shift responsibility away from us, but in the long run, they steal every chance we have to grow. Contrast that with someone who takes responsibility. I remember when I first started in business, I wasn't making progress. I could have blamed the company, blamed the timing, blamed the market, but instead, I had to stop and ask myself, if it's going to change, I have to change. If it's going to get better, I have to get better. That shift was painful but powerful. Responsibility is heavy at first, but it gives you strength. Excuses are light at first, but they leave you weak. The strategy is simple but life-changing. Own your results. Every dollar you have or don't have, every opportunity you seized or missed, every bit of progress or stagnation, it all comes back to you. That's not to condemn, it's to empower. Because if you caused it, you can change it. If it's your responsibility, it's also your power. So here's the practical step. Replace I can't with how can I, every single day. When your mind says I can't save money, ask, how can I save a little today? When you think I can't start a business, shift it to, how can I start small? That one question moves you from victim to creator, from poverty to possibility. Excuses build walls. Responsibility builds doors. Choose responsibility, and you'll discover that wealth was never far. It was always waiting on the other side of your excuses. If you want to win at the game of money, you've got to keep score. And here's the truth. What gets measured improves. It's amazing how many people want financial success but are playing blindfolded. They're working hard, they're earning, they're spending, but they have no clear idea of where it's all going. Imagine a business trying to survive without tracking sales, costs, and profit. It wouldn't last 6 months. Yet so many individuals live their lives without ever treating their finances like the enterprise they truly are. When I was younger, I had to learn this lesson the hard way. I was ambitious, I had energy, I had drive, but I didn't know my numbers. I thought as long as I worked harder, things would take care of themselves. But effort without measurement is like running in the dark. You may be moving, but you don't know if it's forward, backward, or in circles. Once I sat down and began to track the numbers, everything changed. Suddenly, I could see where money was slipping away unnoticed, where I was overspending, where I was underinvesting. Awareness created control, and control created progress. The strategy is simple. Know your numbers like a business does. Think of yourself as the CEO of your financial life. A business has balance sheets, profit and loss statements, and cash flow reports. You don't need to make it complicated, but you need to know the same essentials. How much is coming in? How much is going out? What do you own that has value? What do you owe? Most people avoid this because they're afraid of what they'll find. But avoiding the numbers doesn't make them better, it makes them worse. Facing them, no matter how uncomfortable, gives you the power to change them. Here's the practical step. Every month, track 4 things: your income, your expenses, your assets, and your liabilities. Write them down in a notebook, a spreadsheet, or even an app if you like, but do it consistently. Over time, you'll begin to notice patterns. You'll see that your expenses creep higher when you're not paying attention. You'll see how little changes, like reducing debt or increasing savings, begin to shift your net worth. The numbers don't lie, and they don't flatter. They simply reflect back to you the truth of your financial habits. Think of it this way. If you track your scorecard, you give yourself the chance to play smarter. If you don't, you're just hoping for a win without even knowing the rules. And hope is not a strategy. The scoreboard of money may be uncomfortable to face at first, but it's the very thing that can transform your financial future. Wealth is one of those things that demands 2 qualities that almost seem to contradict each other: patience and urgency. Most people get them flipped. They're patient with their actions, they delay, they procrastinate, they put it off, and then they're urgent with their expectation. They want quick results, overnight riches, immediate payoff. But wealth doesn't respond to impatience in results, it responds to urgency in discipline. The philosophy is simple. Be urgent with your actions, but patient with your results. I had to learn this early in life when I was looking for shortcuts. I thought if I just worked harder for a few months, money would come rushing in. But life doesn't pay that way. Life pays on long-term discipline, not short-term bursts. The farmer doesn't plant seeds today and eat the harvest tomorrow. He plants in faith, waters in discipline, protects in patience, and then reaps in time. And wealth works the very same way. The biggest mistake people make is treating wealth like a sprint instead of a marathon. They want the 10-week plan, the quick scheme, the magic formula. But every shortcut in wealth building is an illusion. The only real path is daily urgency with a decade-long patience. The strategy is to think long-term while working daily. Don't just plan for the weekend, plan for the decade. Ask yourself, where could I be in 10 years if I invested daily discipline today? That's how you start to multiply your wealth. Not by wishing for a jackpot, but by committing to the compounding power of consistent action. Think of the person who saves and invests steadily compared to the one waiting for the perfect opportunity. 10 years later, the steady one is ahead, not because they were smarter, but because they were consistent and patient. The practical step is to commit to a 10-year wealth plan, not a 10-week shortcut. Write it down. Define your long-term vision. Where do you want your income, your investments, your lifestyle, your freedom to be in 10 years? Then break it into daily actions you can control. Reading for growth, saving before spending, practicing your skill, investing automatically. Work on the urgent daily actions with the faith that the results will show up in time. Every day you are building the foundation of your future. Patience in results keeps you from quitting too soon. Urgency in action keeps you from drifting too long. Get those 2 in the right order, and wealth will eventually become the natural outcome. Wages are important. They put food on the table, they keep the lights on, they cover the bills. But let me tell you something, I had to learn the hard way. Wages only make you a living, assets make you wealthy. Too many people spend their entire life chasing a bigger paycheck, hoping that if the numbers on the payslip grow, their wealth will grow too. But that isn't how wealth works. Wealth doesn't come from what you earn. Wealth comes from what you keep and what you build. And more importantly, it comes from what you own that works for you even while you sleep. Early in my life, I thought the secret was simply earning more. I believed that if I could double my wages, I'd double my success. But the truth revealed itself quickly. My expenses grew as fast as my income, sometimes even faster. I was caught in the trap most people fall into, living at the level of my wages instead of building assets that outlive my labor. That's when the shift happened. I realized I needed to buy or create things that grew in value, things that could generate income whether I showed up to work or not. The strategy is simple but life-changing. Don't just spend your energy chasing a bigger paycheck. Channel it into building assets. Assets are businesses, investments, properties, or intellectual creations, things that once built continue to give back. A business doesn't ask if you're tired. It works anyway. A stock doesn't care if you're on vacation. It compounds in value. A property doesn't take a day off. It quietly appreciates and pays rent every month. That's the difference between working for money and having money work for you. The practical step is straightforward. Start directing your resources into assets instead of luxury items. It's tempting, when the paycheck grows, to buy the car, the gadget, the newest thing to impress the neighbors. But every dollar spent on something that rusts, rots, or fades is a dollar that could have been planted into an asset that grows. Instead of buying shoes, buy shares. Instead of a fancy watch, buy a piece of property. Instead of chasing symbols of wealth, build the substance of wealth. The discipline of building assets may not show dramatic results tomorrow, but 10 years from now, it can change your family tree. Because wages will give you a living, but only assets will give you freedom. One of the greatest paradoxes in life is this: the more you give away, the more you seem to receive. It almost doesn't make sense on paper. You'd think if you gave away part of what you have, you'd be left with less. But in truth, contribution multiplies wealth in ways no spreadsheet can fully capture. The secret to living really is giving. When you share what you have, your money, your time, your wisdom, you create a flow, and flow attracts more of what you gave. I can tell you, I've seen wealthy people who were miserable because they'd made everything about accumulation, about keeping score only for themselves. And then I've seen others who, even if they didn't start with much, lived in abundance because they made giving a core part of their philosophy. Contribution breaks the scarcity mindset. It shifts the focus from what can I keep to what can I create. It takes the walls off wealth and allows it to circulate back in ways you didn't expect. The strategy here is simple but profound. Share what you have to create flow. Think of money like water. It becomes stagnant if it only sits. But when it flows, it nourishes, it grows, it multiplies. Contribution doesn't just help others, it expands you. It deepens your character, it widens your perspective, and it makes you more valuable in the marketplace because you're no longer just chasing for yourself, you're building capacity for others. That shift makes you stand taller, think bigger, and attract opportunities you might never have touched if you lived in a closed hand. And here's the practical step. Pick a percentage, 5 to 10% of your income, and give it away on purpose. Don't wait for leftover change. Decide in advance. It could be to a cause you believe in, to someone in need, or even to an organization that aligns with your values. And it's not just about money. Mentor someone who's 1 or 2 steps behind you. Share your lessons, your mistakes, your encouragement. Invest 1 hour a week into lifting someone else, and you'll be amazed how it multiplies your own wealth. Not just financially, but emotionally, relationally, even spiritually. Contribution reminds us that wealth isn't just about possessions. It's about participation. And when you give consistently, you prove to yourself that you're not owned by money. Money is simply a tool in your hand. That posture of generosity creates trust, opens doors, and expands your capacity to receive more. Because when you give freely, you set in motion the very laws of abundance that bring it all back multiplied. Dreams are beautiful things. They ignite our imagination, they give us vision, they whisper to us about what life could be. But here's the truth. Dreams without discipline remain just that. Dreams. Discipline is the bridge between wishes and reality. It is the tool that takes an idea from your head and plants it firmly into your life. Everyone wants success. Everyone wants wealth. Everyone wants freedom. But very few are willing to practice the daily disciplines required to make those dreams come alive. I remember when I was young, I had all kinds of dreams. I wanted to be free. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to travel the world. But for a while, I lived in what I call wish land. I wished things were different. I wished for more money. I wished for better opportunities. Wishing didn't change anything. The day things turned around for me was the day I understood that success doesn't respond to wishes, it responds to discipline. That's when I began to ask myself, what small things could I do every single day that would compound into a big difference in the future? The strategy is clear. Build daily habits that compound. You don't need 100 disciplines. You just need a few practiced consistently. The problem isn't that we don't know what to do. Most of us know. The problem is that we let feelings decide our actions. But feelings are fleeting. Discipline is steady. Discipline says, I will save before I spend. Discipline says, I will read instead of waste time. Discipline says, I will move my body because strength and energy are part of wealth. Wealth is built not in a moment of inspiration, but in the quiet repetition of right actions over time. So here's the practical step. Stick to 3 simple disciplines every day. Save something, no matter how small, before you spend. Read at least 20 minutes to feed your mind, because your income will rarely exceed your personal growth. And exercise, because health is the foundation that allows you to enjoy everything else. These 3 habits alone, practiced daily, will begin to shift your future. They may seem small, but so does a seed. And yet, with time and care, a seed becomes a forest. Discipline is not punishment. It is freedom in disguise. Because when you master the small disciplines, the big dreams stop being dreams. They become your reality. Money is one of the most fascinating inventions of human beings. It's nothing more than paper and numbers, yet it carries so much power because of the meaning we assign to it. For some people, money becomes the master. They wake up thinking about it, they go to bed worrying about it, and every decision they make is chained to it. But true wealth begins when you flip the relationship, when money becomes the servant and you become the master. Freedom comes when money serves you, not when it rules you. The philosophy is simple. Money is a tool. That's all it is. A tool to buy back your time, to create options, to secure your family, to support causes you care about, and to build a life of meaning. But a tool only works when you direct it with purpose. If you leave it lying around, it gets wasted. If you use it recklessly, it causes damage. But if you handle it with skill, it builds, it multiplies, it creates something greater than itself. I've seen people with high incomes who are still broke because they let money rule them. The moment they earn it, it slips through their fingers into things that do not serve them. Status symbols, vanity purchases, quick pleasures. On the other hand, I've seen people with modest incomes but real wealth because they tell every dollar where to go. They budget, they invest, they save, they give. They don't let money dictate the terms of their life. They direct it like a skilled craftsman. Here's a practical step you can use starting today. Before you spend, pause and ask one question. Does this purchase buy me freedom, or does it buy me vanity? Freedom purchases are those that expand your life, investments, education, health, experiences that enrich your relationships. Vanity purchases are those that shrink your future for the sake of appearances, things bought to impress, not to progress. One builds your future, the other robs it. If you want to be wealthy, master the tool. Take charge of every dollar. Give it an assignment. Let none of it wander without purpose, because money left without direction will always serve someone else. But money directed with vision becomes a faithful servant, building, growing, and creating a life where you are in control. Wealth is not built by numbers alone. If wealth were only math, then anyone with a calculator would be rich. But the truth is, wealth is far more about behavior than equations. It's about what happens in the mind long before it happens in the wallet. Money is 20% math, 80% psychology. You don't need to be a financial genius to build wealth, but you do need to understand yourself, your patterns, your triggers, your weaknesses, and your tendencies. Because if you don't master your behavior will master your money. Think about it. Most people don't go broke because they couldn't calculate interest rates. They go broke because of impulse. Because on a stressful day, that purchase felt like comfort. Because comparison whispered, if they have it, so should you. Because discipline took a back seat to emotion. And over time, small emotional leaks drain the largest of financial ships. Wealth is not lost in one bad decision. It erodes from 1,000 unexamined ones. The key is awareness. One of the most powerful practices you can adopt is to track not just what you spend, but why you spent it. Keep a small journal and write down your emotional purchases. Maybe it was retail therapy after a hard week. Maybe it was a celebration splurge that went beyond what was necessary. Don't judge it, just record it. Then, at the end of the month, review the pattern. You'll begin to see that money is not just about dollars, it's about decisions. And those decisions are driven by psychology. Once you know your triggers, you can disarm them. If stress makes you spend, build healthier stress relievers, exercise, journaling, or a walk instead of swiping the card. If comparison drives you, remind yourself that most people who look rich are buried in debt. If boredom is the trigger, replace it with creation instead of consumption. Remember, producers build wealth, consumers fund it. Over time, this awareness creates power. Because the goal is not to stop spending entirely, but to start spending with intention. When you understand your psychology, you stop being a servant to your impulses and become the master of your money. Wealth doesn't begin in the bank, it begins in the mind. The greatest measure of wealth is not what you accumulate, but what remains after you are gone. Legacy is the highest form of wealth. Money, houses, and possessions may pass from hand to hand, but the true impact of a life is found in what outlives it. When you begin to think not just in terms of days or years, but in decades and generations, your perspective on wealth changes. You no longer ask, what can I get? You begin asking, what can I build that will last? Most people live only for the present. They trade long-term significance for short-term comfort. They buy things that fade instead of creating things that endure. But if you want true wealth, you must think like a planter, not a consumer. A farmer doesn't eat all his seed. He plants some, knowing the harvest will feed many in the future. In the same way, your goal should be to create at least one thing that continues to bear fruit even after you no longer tend it. That's what it means to build something that outlives you.